What if the alchemists were never chasing gold? What if they had already found something far more valuable? Look closer at what they left behind. Cryptic diagrams that match modern chemical processes. Copper crucibles with residue that should not exist. Descriptions of living metals and the hidden breath of iron. Properties of matter that our most advanced laboratories still cannot fully explain. These were not dreamers. They were masters of the physical world, operating with a knowledge of metallurgy so precise it has never been replicated. By the end of this investigation, you will see the artifacts, the formulas, and the suppressed discoveries that prove the alchemists of the medieval age had unlocked secrets of matter and metal that our digital world has completely forgotten. The furnaces went cold. The scrolls were hidden. But tonight, the past speaks through fire and steel, and what it reveals will change everything you thought you knew about the history of science. The air inside the workshop is thick and heavy, saturated with the scent of charred oak and the metallic tang of cooling iron. Shadows dance against walls of rough-hewn stone, cast by a fire that never truly dies. In the center of this world stands a hearth, a glowing eye of orange and white heat that seems to breathe with a life of its own. Hey, the boundary between the physical and the metaphysical does not exist. To the modern observer, this is a place of primitive industry. To the ancient metal worker, it is a temple. It is a site of a profound conversation between humanity and the hidden forces of the earth. The hammer falls. It is a rhythmic, steady strike that resonates through the floorboards and into the soles of the smith's feet. With every impact, a shower of sparks illuminates the darkness like a dying star. The metal, once a cold and stubborn rock pulled from the dark veins of a mountain, is now a glowing, pliable ribbon of light. It obeys the will of the artisan, yet it retains a will of its own. This is a fundamental mystery of metallurgy, a craft that predates written history and forms the very bedrock of civilization. But what if our ancestors understood this process in a way that goes beyond the chemical formulas and atomic structures of the present day? In the modern world, we view metals as inert commodities. They are categorized by their melting point, their tensile strength, and their electrical conductivity. We see them as dead matter, waiting to be shaped into wires, beams, and circuits. However, the ancient alchemists and the sacred smith operate under a different set of laws. To them, the earth is a living organism, a cosmic womb where it will grow and mature over eons. Gold is not merely an element with 79 protons. It is a finished, perfected state of matter, the solar metal that has reached its spiritual maturity. Lead, by contrast, is a premature birth, a heavy and dark substance that still yearns to be transformed. This perspective changes everything about the act of smithing. When the ancient artisan approaches a hearth, they are not merely performing mechanical tasks. They are participating in a rite of acceleration. They believe that by using fire and ritual, they can accomplish in a few hours what the earth takes thousands of years to achieve. They are midwives to the mineral kingdom. This sense of sacred responsibility permeates every movement. The bellows are not just tools for oxygenation. They are the lungs of the forge, breathing spirit into the flames. The narrator pauses as a camera of the mind focuses on the glowing crucible. Within that clay vessel, copper and tin are beginning to dance. They melt into a liquid state, shedding their individual identities to become something entirely new. This is the birth of bronze, an event that once fundamentally altered the trajectory of human history. To the ancient mind, this is not just an alloy. It is a marriage. It is a union of two distinct essences to create a child that is stronger and more resilient than either parent. The proportions must be exact, but the timing is equally vital. The smith watches the color of the flame and the shimmer on the surface of the molten pool. They listen to the hiss of the metal, interpreting its voice with a precision that defies modern measurement. There is a lingering question that haunts the halls of archaeology and the history of science. How did these early practitioners achieve such remarkable results without the aid of thermometers, spectrometers, or computer-controlled furnaces? We look at the Damascus steel blades of the past, with their swirling patterns and legendary sharpness, and we struggle to replicate them perfectly today. We examine the pillars of non-rusting iron in India and the intricate gold work of the pre-Columbian Americas, and we wonder if we have lost a specific kind of literacy. Perhaps their knowledge was not a precursor to our science, but a parallel path of understanding that we have since abandoned. In the silence of the ancient workshop, the smith does not speak. They understand that the metal is sensitive to the environment, to the humidity in the air, and even to the intent of the maker. There is a psychological component to the craft that has been scrubbed away by the Industrial Revolution. In the ancient world, the smith is often a figure of both fear and reverence. They live on the outskirts of the village, near the boundary of the wild. They are the masters of the fire, the only ones who can negotiate with the spirits of the deep earth. To enter their space is to enter a liminal zone where the solid world becomes fluid. Consider the role of the hearth as an altar. The fuel is chosen with care, often involving specific types of wood that are believed to possess certain spiritual qualities. The charcoal is not just carbon. It is the stored energy of the sun, released through controlled combustion to provide the necessary heat for transmutation. As the metal reaches a critical temperature, the smith begins a low chant. This is not mere superstition. Recent studies in somatics show how sound vibrations can influence the physical structure of matter. Could it be that the rhythmic chanting and the specific frequency of the hammer strike were used to align the crystalline structure of the metal in ways we are only beginning to investigate? The documentary lens pulls back to reveal the wider landscape. The smoke from the forge rises into a clear, star-speckled sky. The ancients believed that the metals in the ground were reflections of the celestial bodies above. Gold belonged to the sun, silver to the moon, iron to Mars, and copper to Venus. This connection meant that the work of the smith was always synchronized with the movement of the heavens. A sword forged under certain alignment of planets was thought to carry the virtues of those spheres. It was a holistic science, where the laboratory and the observatory were one and the same. We often dismiss these ideas as poetic metaphors, yet the results of this ancient knowledge are undeniable. The artifacts that survive today possess a soulfulness and a durability that modern mass production cannot match. There is a hidden language written in the grain of the steel and the patina of the bronze. It is a language of resonance and relationship. The ancient smith did not seek to dominate nature, but to collaborate with it. They understood that every piece of wood carries a memory of the earth from which it was taken. To work the metal was to honor that memory while guiding it toward a higher purpose. The fire in the hearth begins to settle into a deep, pulsing red. The heavy work is done, and the cooling process begins. This is the most delicate stage, known as the tempering. If the metal is cooled too quickly, it becomes brittle and shatters like glass. If it is cooled too slowly, it remains soft and useless. The smith uses their senses, their intuition, and a lifetime of inherited wisdom to find the perfect moment of transition. They might quench the blade in oil, in water, or perhaps in a substance that carries specific chemical properties known only to their guild. This secret knowledge was passed down through generations, protected by oaths and shrouded in mystery. As we look back at these whispers from the hearth, we must ask ourselves what we have traded for our modern efficiency. We have gained the ability to produce tons of steel in an instant, but we have lost the intimate connection to the material. We have forgotten how to listen to the metal. The alchemists sought more than just a physical product. They sought a transformation of the self. As the metal was purified in the fire, the smith believed their own spirit was being refined. The hearth was a mirror. The struggle with the stubborn iron was a reflection of the struggle with one's own internal flaws. The segment draws to a close as the final embers of the workshop fire flicker and fade. The finished object, perhaps a ritual bowl or a ceremonial dagger, sits on the anvil, it is no longer just a piece of the earth. It has been elevated. It has passed through the trial of fire and emerged as a testament to the partnership between human consciousness and the physical world. The whispers of the hearth tell a story of a time when we knew the secret names of the elements and understood that the world was far more mysterious than it appeared. We are left to wonder if the path forward might require us to look backward into the glowing heart of the ancient forge to rediscover the sacred art of the smith. The metal is waiting. The fire is ready. The conversation is far from over. In the quiet of a stone-walled laboratory, where the only light comes from the glowing embers of a furnace and the silver sliver of a crescent moon, a profound philosophy takes shape. The alchemist does not look at a piece of metal and see an inert or dead object. To them, the earth is a living organism, a breathing entity that grows its treasures in the dark silence of the subterranean world. This is a doctrine of the 7 planetary metals, a belief that the heavens and the earth are locked in a perpetual and rhythmic dance. Every piece of ore pulled from the deep crust of the world is thought to be a reflection of a celestial body, a captured piece of starlight hardened into physical form. This concept is governed by the law of correspondence. The ancient practitioners summarize this as a phrase, as above, so below. It suggests that the movements of the planets in the vast expanse of the cosmos are mirrored in the chemical reactions within a crucible. There are 7 wandering stars known to the ancient world, and there are 7 primary metals found within the earth. To the alchemist, this is not a coincidence. It is a fundamental map of reality. At the bottom of this spiritual and physical hierarchy sits lead. Lead is a metal of Saturn, the furthest and slowest of the visible planets. In the hands of the alchemist, lead is heavy, dull, and gray. It represents the beginning of a journey, the primal matter that is weighted down by the burdens of time and mortality. Saturn is a god of time, the harvester who reminds us that all things must eventually wither. Lead is seen as a cold and melancholic metal. However, it is also the most important. Without lead, there is no starting point for transformation. It is a raw, unrefined soul of the earth. The alchemists believe that lead contains a hidden spark of perfection, buried deep within its dense and gloomy exterior. They see it as a metal that is old and wise, holding the secrets of the foundations of the world. Moving upward from the heaviness of lead, we encounter tin. Tin is a metal of Jupiter, the king of the gods. Where lead is contracted and heavy, tin is expansive and bright. It has a peculiar quality known as the cry of tin, a distinct cracking sound made when the metal is bent. To an ancient mind, this is the voice of the metal itself. Jupiter represents authority, growth, and the social order. Tin is a metal that brings stability to alloys, just as a wise ruler brings stability to a kingdom. It is a bridge between the humble and the magnificent. In the laboratory, the alchemist watches how tin flows and interacts, noting its willingness to bond with others. They see it as an expression of the breath of life expanding into the world. Moving upward from the heaviness of lead, we encounter tin. Tin is the metal of Jupiter, the king of the gods. Where lead is contracted and heavy, tin is expansive and bright. It has a peculiar quality known as the cry of tin, a distinct cracking sound made when the metal is bent. To an ancient mind, this is the voice of the metal itself. Jupiter represents authority, growth, and the social order. Tin is a metal that brings stability to alloys, just as a wise ruler brings stability to a kingdom. It is a bridge between the humble and the magnificent. In the laboratory, the alchemist watches how tin flows and interacts, noting its willingness to bond with others. They see it as an expression of the breath of life expanding into the world. Next is a metal of the red planet, Mars. This is iron. Iron is a metal of strength, of tools, and of war. It is also the metal of the blood. The ancients noticed that when iron is exposed to the air, it turns a rusty red, the same color as a planet that hangs like a drop of blood in the night sky. Iron represents the force of will and the power of protection. It is a metal that builds the plows that feed the people and the swords that defend them. To the alchemist, iron is the seat of the vital heat. It is a masculine and active force. They believe that by understanding iron, they can understand the nature of energy and the drive that pushes life forward through the harshest of winters. In the middle of the celestial ladder, we find copper, the metal of Venus. Copper is warm and inviting, glowing with a reddish gold hue that speaks of beauty and affection. It is the metal of the mirror, used for centuries by those who wish to see their own reflection. Venus is a planet of love and harmony, and copper is its earthly representative. Copper is an excellent conductor, even if the ancients did not use that specific word. They understood that it has a unique ability to transmit and receive. It is a social metal, a feminine force that seeks to unify and balance. When an alchemist works with copper, they are working with the principle of attraction. They see the green patina that forms on its surface as a sign of the living spirit of nature reclaiming the metal. Then comes the most mysterious of all the elements, Mercury, or quicksilver. It is the metal of the planet Mercury, the messenger of the gods. This metal is a paradox. It is a solid that acts like a liquid. It is heavy like lead but flows like water. It refuses to be contained and breaks apart into 1,000 tiny spheres only to rush back together again. To the alchemist, Mercury is a bridge between the physical and the spiritual. It is a philosophical Mercury that represents a mind, ever-changing and impossible to grasp. It is the medium through which all transformations occur. Because it can dissolve other metals like gold and silver, it is seen as the universal solvent of the soul. It is the wild and volatile spirit that must be tamed to the alchemist to reach the final goal. Above Mercury sits silver, the metal of the moon. Silver is cool, reflective, and pure. It represents the subconscious, the intuition, and the mysteries of the night. Just as the moon reflects the light of the sun, silver reflects the hidden truths of the universe. It is a metal of high conductivity and immense clarity. The alchemist associates silver with the white stage of the great work, a point of purification where all impurities have been burnt away. To hold a piece of cool silver is to hold a fragment of the night sky, a reminder of the shifting tides and the gentle influence of the lunar cycles on the waters of the earth and the fluids of the body. Finally, at the pinnacle of the work is gold. Gold is the metal of the sun. It is the only metal that does not tarnish or decay. It is immutable and eternal. In the eyes of the alchemist, gold is not just a currency or a decoration. It is a physical manifestation of perfection. It is the healed state of matter. Every other metal is seen as being on a long, slow journey through the centuries, gradually maturing within the womb of the earth until it eventually becomes gold. The alchemist simply seeks to accelerate this natural process in the laboratory. Gold represents the enlightened spirit, the heart of the world, and the ultimate source of life and light. To create gold is to achieve a state of harmony with the divine. But what if these ancient thinkers knew something about these metals that our modern periodic tables have forgotten? Today, we view metals through the lens of atomic numbers, electron shells, and crystalline structures. We see them as resources to be mined and used for technology. The alchemists, however, saw them as sentient. They believed that metals had a memory and a resonance. They believed that the time of day, the position of the stars, and the intent of the observer could change the way a metal behaved in the forge. There are stories whispered in old texts of metals that could vibrate in sympathy with the human voice. There are accounts of ancient smiths who could soften iron using only herbal vapors and rhythmic chanting. This suggests a lost science of resonance, where the physical properties of a metal were not fixed, but were instead fluid and responsive to the environment. If we look at a piece of copper today, we see a lattice of ions. But if we could look through the eyes of an ancient master, we might see a web of connections reaching out to the planet Venus, humming with a specific frequency that influences the human heart. The alchemists spoke of the soul of the metal, a hidden essence that survived even when the metal was melted or dissolved. They believed that by purifying the metal, they were also purifying themselves. The furnace was not just a tool for chemistry, it was a site of spiritual initiation. The relationship between the 7 planets and the 7 metals created a complete system of understanding, a way to see the entire universe as a single, interconnected web. This perspective allowed them to perceive patterns and relationships that we might miss in our highly specialized and fragmented world of modern science. They saw the world as a mirror. When they looked up at the stars, they saw the origins of the riches beneath their feet. When they looked into their crucibles, they saw the potential for the human soul to rise from the heaviness of lead to the brilliance of gold. This ancient knowledge was not a set of superstitions, but a different way of knowing, one that prioritized a relationship between the observer and the observed. It was a science of quality rather than just a science of quantity. As we move deeper into the mysteries of the workshop, we must wonder how much of this subtle reality still exists, waiting to be rediscovered by those who are willing to listen to the silent language of the elements. In the shadows of the laboratory, the 7 metals wait, their earthly souls still vibrating with the ancient music of the spheres. A single drop of water falls onto a glowing orange surface, and the world of the smithy is momentarily swallowed by a hiss of steam. Within the dim light of a workshop that could be in modern-day Damascus or ancient Isfahan, a master craftsman holds a blade that seems to breathe. This is not the uniform, sterile steel of a modern skyscraper or a kitchen appliance. This is something older, something born from a marriage of fire and geometric precision that modern science is only beginning to decode. Iron, in its raw state, is a humble and stubborn element. It is the 4th most common element in the crust of the earth, yet it guards its secrets with a fierce tenacity. To transform it into steel is to perform an act of molecular architecture. The narrator watches as the smith hammers the metal. Each strike is deliberate, a rhythmic pulse that echoes the heartbeat of the forge. In the traditional narrative of progress, we are told that the Industrial Revolution perfected the art of metalworking. We are led to believe that the steel of the past was brittle, inconsistent, and inferior to the alloys we produce today in our computer-controlled furnaces. However, when researchers look closer at the blades of the ancient world, they find a reality that contradicts this tidy progression. They find a forgotten geometry, a way of arranging atoms that suggests the alchemists of the past were working with a level of sophistication that defies easy explanation. In the laboratories of the 21st century, electron microscopes reveal the truth hidden within the dark, swirling patterns of a true Damascus blade. These patterns, often described as flowing water or drifting clouds, are not merely decorative. They are the external signature of a complex internal structure. Scientists have discovered that these ancient blades contain carbon nanotubes and nanowires of cementite. These are structures that modern materials science usually associates with high technology in clean rooms, not with a charcoal fire and a hand bellows. The alchemists did not have a word for nanotechnology, but they possessed a process that achieved its results. The secret begins with the crucible. In the regions of India and Sri Lanka, ancient metallurgists produced what is known as wood steel. They placed high-purity iron ore, wood, and specific leaves into a clay vessel, then sealed it shut to exclude all oxygen. This vessel was heated for days at a temperature that barely reached the melting point of the iron. Inside that dark, pressurized womb, a slow transformation occurred. The carbon from the plant matter did not just coat the iron. It migrated into it, arranging itself into a specific lattice. This is a geometry of steel. It is a 3-dimensional puzzle where carbon atoms sit in the gaps between iron atoms, creating a tension that gives the metal its strength. The ancient smiths understood that the cooling of this metal was as important as the heating. They spoke of the metal having a temper, a word that suggests a psychological state as much as a physical one. To temper a blade is to balance its conflicting desires. It wants to be hard so that it can hold an edge, but it also wants to be flexible so that it does not shatter upon impact. Modern industry achieves this through precise chemical additives like chromium, vanadium, or molybdenum. The ancient alchemists, however, achieved it through a mastery of internal geometry. They understood that if the metal cooled too quickly, the atoms would be frozen in a state of chaotic stress, resulting in a blade as fragile as glass. If it cooled too slowly, the crystals would grow too large, leaving the metal soft and dull. The alchemists found the middle path. They watched the colors of the glowing metal with an intensity that bordered on the religious. They waited for the exact shade of cherry red, or the fleeting moment when the steel turned the color of a pigeon's neck or withered straw. These colors were their thermometers, calibrated by generations of observation. There are legends of blades that could be bent into a circle, tip-touching hilt, only to spring back perfectly straight without a single ripple in the metal. There are accounts of silk scarves being dropped onto an upturned edge and severing under their own weight. To the modern observer, these stories sound like exaggerations, the tall tales of a romanticized past. Yet, when we analyze the microscopic tooth of an ancient crucible steel edge, we find a jagged, serrated landscape at the molecular level. These blades were, in effect, microscopic saws, capable of cutting through fibers that would slide off a modern, polished edge. The mystery deepens when we consider the quenching process. In the ancient world, the liquid used to cool the hot steel was often a guarded secret. Some alchemists insisted on the use of goat urine, while others preferred the water of a specific mountain stream or even the blood of a red-headed boy. While these ingredients sound like pure superstition, modern chemistry suggests there may have been a functional logic at play. The salts, minerals, and nitrogen levels in these organic fluids would alter the rate of heat transfer from the metal. They acted as complex quenching agents that provided a more nuanced cooling curve than pure water oil. The alchemist was not just following a ritual. He was manipulating the thermal conductivity of the environment to dictate the final crystalline arrangement of the steel. Consider the concept of the dendrite. When steel cools, it forms branch-like structures that look remarkably like the frost on a window pane or the reaching limbs of a tree. In modern steel, we try to eliminate these structures to create a uniform, isotropic material. But the ancient smiths embraced them. They learned how to fold, twist, and manipulate these dendritic growths through thousands of hammer blows. By doing so, they created a composite material. They were essentially weaving with metal. Harder layers were encased in tougher, more flexible ones, creating a structural harmony that modern mass production cannot easily replicate. This is the lost geometry. It is a way of thinking about matter not as a bulk substance to be melted and cast, but as a living fabric to be guided and trained. The alchemists view the metal as having memory. Every heat, every hammer blow, and every cooling cycle was etched into the molecular soul of the blade. They believed that if they were pure in their intent and precise in their movements, the metal would reward them with perfection that seemed to transcend the physical world. As we move further into the age of automated manufacturing, the gap between the maker and the material grows wider. We have forgotten the language of the spark and the subtle song the anvil sings when the steel is at the right temperature. We have gained the ability to produce millions of tons of identical steel, but we have lost the ability to create a single piece of metal that possesses a unique geometric soul of the ancient works. We look at the Damascus patterns today and we see beauty, but the alchemists saw a map. They saw a road map of the metal's journey through the fire, a visible proof of a hidden order. The narrator pauses as the image of the forge begins to fade into the cool, gray light of a modern laboratory. "Hey, The ancient blades sit in glass cases, poked and prodded by lasers and sensors. The scientists shake their heads in quiet frustration. They can identify the carbon nanotubes. They can map the cementite nanowires. They can measure the hardness to the 4th decimal point. But they cannot quite explain how a man sitting in the dust 1,000 years ago, with nothing but a clay pot and a handful of leaves, managed to achieve a structural perfection that we still find difficult to mimic. Perhaps the knowledge of the alchemists was not just a collection of recipes, but a different way of seeing. They did not see the world as a collection of dead objects to be exploited. They saw it as a grand geometry, a sacred arrangement of shapes and forces that could be harmonized if one knew the correct resonance. Steel was their masterpiece, a physical bridge between the hardness of the earth and the fluidity of the spirit. It was a forgotten geometry, a map of the stars rendered in iron and carbon, waiting for a world that had forgotten how to read the language of the flame. In the silence of the museum, the blades remain. They do not rust, and they do not lose their edge. They wait in their cases, their surface patterns shifting like the tide, a silent testament to a time when men knew the secrets of the grain and the temper. They remind us that history is not always a straight line of improvement. Sometimes it is a circle, and sometimes, in the shadows of the past, there are lights that burn brighter than anything we have managed to ignite in the present. The geometry of the steel is still there, locked in the lattice, a silent witness to a mastery that slipped through the fingers of time, leaving only the ghost of a pattern behind. The air in the workshop is thick, not with the scent of failure, but with a heavy, metallic tang of potential. It is an atmosphere of deep, patient waiting. This is the heart of chrysopoeia, the legendary art of gold-making. To the modern observer, this pursuit is often dismissed as a fevered dream of the scientifically illiterate, a desperate scramble for wealth through chemical trickery. But as a firelight flickers against the soot-stained walls, a different story emerges. This is not a quest for easy riches. It is an intricate, disciplined study of the very fabric of reality. The alchemist does not see gold as a separate, distinct element in the way a modern chemist does. Instead, gold is a final state of a long, slow journey. It is the destination toward which all matter is naturally traveling. In this worldview, lead is not a failure. It is simply a child, an immature form of matter that has not yet reached its full potential. The workshop is organized around a central furnace, known as the Athena. It is designed to provide a steady, unwavering heat, mirroring the warmth of the sun or the internal heat of the earth. Hey, time is a physical ingredient. The alchemists believe that metals grow within the womb of the earth over vast, geological timescales. Left to its own devices, the earth will eventually turn all base metals into gold. But this process takes millennia. The alchemist seeks to act as a midwife to nature, using the laboratory to compress thousands of years of natural growth into a single human lifetime. This is the first great secret of the craft, the mastery of the rhythm of time itself. The process begins with the nigredo, or the blackening. The base material is broken down, stripped of its previous identity, and reduced to a dark, chaotic mass. It is a symbolic death. In the silence of the laboratory, the alchemist watches as the matter in the glass vessel dissolves. It is a slow, rhythmic decay. The liquid bubbles with a gentle, hypnotic consistency. There is no rush here. The fire must be kept at a precise temperature, neither too fierce nor too cool. If the rhythm is broken, the work is lost. This stage represents the stripping away of the ego, the removal of the impurities that prevent the metal and the soul from reaching perfection. As the weeks turn into months, the blackness begins to shift. A shimmering, iridescent film appears on the surface of the liquid, a phenomenon the ancients called the peacock's tail. It is a sign that the matter is beginning to reorganize. The chaos of the nigredo is giving way to a new order. This leads into the albedo, the whitening. The material becomes a brilliant, pure white. It is said to be as bright as the moon, reflecting a cold, crystalline clarity. At this stage, the metal has been purified. It is no longer lead, but it is not yet gold. It is a blank slate, a state of perfect receptivity. The alchemist moves with a measured grace, adjusted to the pulse of the furnace. They understand something that modern high-speed manufacturing has forgotten, that the quality of the result is inextricably linked to the state of the environment in which it is created. If the alchemist is agitated, the metal will be brittle. If the alchemist is distracted, the transmutation will fail. There is a resonance between the observer and the observed, a feedback loop where the internal state of the person influences the molecular arrangement of the metal. This is where the what-if begins to take a physical shape. What if the ancient alchemists discovered that consciousness and intention could exert a subtle but measurable influence on the weak nuclear force or the crystalline structure of an alloy? We know today that the difference between lead and gold is a matter of atomic structure, a difference of exactly 3 protons. To change one into the other requires the immense energy of a particle accelerator or the heart of a collapsing star. It is a process of brute force, of smashing atoms together at near light speed. But the alchemist approaches the problem differently. They do not use force. They use resonance. They use the rhythms of heating and cooling, the cycles of evaporation and condensation, to gently coax the atoms into a new configuration. They treat the metal as a living thing, a harmony that can be retuned. In the second half of the work, the citrinitas or yellowing begins. The white matter starts to glow with a golden hue. This is a transition from the lunar to the solar. The laboratory is filled with a soft, warm light that seems to emanate from the vessels themselves. The air feels charged, as if a storm is about to break. But the tension is held in a delicate balance. This is the most dangerous part of the work. The heat must be increased, but with a precision that defies modern explanation. The alchemist listens to the sounds of the metal, the way it rings against the glass, the way it sighs as it cools. They are looking for a specific frequency, a harmonic vibration that signals the final transformation. Finally, the rubedo, the reddening, arrives. The matter turns a deep, vibrant crimson. This is a philosopher's stone in its liquid form, the tincture. It is the realization of the great work. When this red powder oil is projected onto molten lead, the lead is said to shudder. It undergoes a profound, instantaneous reorganization. The dull, gray surface of the base metal ripples like water and then settles into the brilliant, unyielding luster of gold. To the alchemist, this is not a miracle. It is the inevitable result of a perfectly executed process. It is the sound of a bell finally being struck at the correct pitch. What if this knowledge was not a metaphor? Consider the possibility that the ancients understood the concept of isotopes and atomic weights long before the advent of the periodic table. Their language was one of symbols, of lions devouring the sun and eagles taking flight. But these images may have been precise technical instructions for manipulating the energy states of electrons. By using specific minerals as catalysts and maintaining a specific thermal rhythm, they may have found a back door into the structure of matter. While we use the hammer of nuclear physics, they may have used a needle of sympathetic resonance. The documentary camera pans across a collection of surviving alchemical vessels. They are made of thick, green glass, shaped like birds or curled serpents. These are not just containers. They are resonators. The shape of a vessel determines the way heat and vapor circulate within it, creating standing waves of pressure and temperature. The alchemist is a conductor, and the laboratory is an orchestra. Every movement is deliberate. Every hour of the day and night has a specific significance. They work in harmony with the tides, the phases of the moon, and the shifting of the seasons. They believe that the cosmos is a single, unified system, and that to change a piece of metal, one must be in tune with the whole. This sense of cosmic timing is perhaps the most alien concept to the modern mind. We live in a world of instant gratification and constant, linear progress. But the alchemist lives in a world of cycles. They understand that there is a time for the metal to sleep and a time for it to wake. There is a time for the fire to roar and a time for it to be a ember. By following these rhythms, they claim to achieve what we think is impossible. They do not fight nature. They accelerate it. The silence in the laboratory is profound. The only sound is a rhythmic breathing of the bellows and the occasional crackle of the charcoal. The alchemist sits in the shadows, their eyes fixed on the glowing crucible. They are not looking for wealth. The gold they produce is a byproduct, a proof of concept. The real transformation has happened within. By spending years in the pursuit of perfection, by aligning their own internal rhythms with the slow, deep pulses of the earth and the stars, they have become something more than they were. The metal has changed, and so have they. As the sun begins to rise, the fire in the aether is allowed to die down. The process is complete. Whether the gold in the bottom of the crucible is a result of a hidden science or profound misunderstanding, the mastery of the process remains undeniable. The alchemist has spent a lifetime learning how to listen to the whispers of matter, how to dance with the shadows of the elements. They have lived in a world where the boundary between the physical and the spiritual is as thin as a veil of smoke. The gold sits on the workbench, heavy and cold. It is a witness to a path of knowledge that diverged from our own centuries ago. We chose the path of the machine, of measurement, and of force. They chose the path of the rhythm, of the symbol, and of the soul. In the quiet of the laboratory, it is hard not to wonder if something vital was lost in that choice. The gold remains, a silent testament to a time when humans believed they could talk to the very atoms of the earth, and that the earth, in its own slow, rhythmic way, would answer back. The transmutation is not just an act of chemistry. It is a dialogue with time, a melody played on the strings of the universe, where the final note is always golden. In the dim, flickering light of a hearth fire, the crucible sits motionless. It is a humble vessel of clay and graphite, yet it functions as the center of a world. Within its belly, the boundaries between the material and the spiritual do not simply blur. They vanish entirely. The alchemist watches the slow dance of the molten surface, understanding that what occurs within the heat is not merely a change of state, but a transformation of the soul. In this space, the metal is not a dead resource to be exploited. It is a partner in a cosmic ritual. This is a place where science meets the mystical, a threshold where the properties of lead and the aspirations of the human spirit are forged in the same fire. We often think of modern science as a journey toward clarity, stripping away the superstitions of the past to reveal the hard, cold facts of the universe. However, as we look close to the records of the ancient world, we find a different kind of clarity. It is a clarity born of observation so deep that it borders on the supernatural. The alchemists did not see a periodic table of independent elements. They saw a web of relationships. They understood that a piece of copper was not just a collection of atoms, but a manifestation of Venus, carrying with it the heat of passion and the flexibility of life. When they heated this copper, they were not just melting a metal. They were coaxing a dormant spirit to wake up. In the modern laboratory, we speak of crystalline structures and thermal conductivity. We use machines to peer into the microscopic lattices of a metal to see how its atoms are arranged. We find that metals are surprisingly complex. They have a memory. They can be tired, a phenomenon we call metal fatigue. They can be hardened by stress or softened by heat. The alchemists knew these things too, though they described them in the language of the heart. They spoke of the metal being purified by its trials, of its need to be born again in the fire to shed its impurities. Could it be that their poetic language was not a cover for ignorance, but a more accurate description of the internal life of matter than our own clinical terms? Consider the behavior of alloys. When two metals are combined, the resulting substance often possesses qualities that neither parent metal had on its own. Bronze is harder than copper and tougher than tin. To the ancient mind, this was a marriage. It was the birth of a child that inherited the best traits of its lineage. They watched the way the colors merged, the way the sound of the metal changed when struck, and they saw a spiritual union. They believed that if the proportions were perfect and the timing was aligned with the movements of the stars, the resulting metal would be more than the sum of its parts. It would become a bridge to the divine. There is a concept in modern metallurgy called shape memory. Certain alloys, when bent or twisted, can return to their original shape simply by being heated. To a modern engineer, this is a fascinating application of phase transitions in crystal structures. To an alchemist, this would be proof of the soul within the metal. It is the metal remembering who it is meant to be. It is the inherent form asserting itself over the chaos of external force. If the ancients possessed knowledge of such materials, they would not have seen them as made tools. They would have seen them as sacred objects, physical proof that the universe possesses an inherent order and a desire to return to perfection. The crucible is more than just a part. It is a microcosm of the entire universe. Inside its circular walls, the four elements of earth, air, fire, and water are brought into a tense and productive harmony. The metal is the earth. The bellows provide the air. The furnace provides the fire. And the molten state of the material is the water. The alchemist acts as a fifth element, the quintessence, the conscious observer whose intent directs the flow of energy. There is a persistent theory in some circles of alternative history that the alchemists knew something about the power of the mind to influence the physical state of matter. While modern physics is only beginning to grapple with the role of the observer in quantum mechanics, the alchemists took it as a fundamental truth. They believed that a distracted or impure worker could never produce gold, not because they would make a mistake in the recipe, but because their very presence would contaminate the resonance of the metal. This idea of resonance is key to understanding where the science and the mystical meet. Every material has a frequency at which it vibrates. Today, we use this principle in everything from quartz watches to radio transmitters. The alchemists understood this through the lens of music and harmony. They believed that the universe was a great song, and that metals were specific notes within that song. To transform one metal into another was to change its pitch. It was an act of tuning. They used chants, bells, and specific rhythms of hammering to encourage the metal to find its new frequency. It sounds like folklore until one considers modern experiments in somatics, where sound waves are used to organize matter into complex geometric patterns. If sound can shape sand and water, why could it not influence the cooling lattice of a molten alloy? In the quiet hours of the night, as the forge cools and the world outside falls into a deep slumber, the alchemist sits with their notes. These journals are filled with symbols that look like art but function like code. A lion eating the sun, a toad drinking the milk of a dragon. These were not fantasies. They were precise instructions for chemical reactions, hidden in plain sight. They described the stages of the work, the blackening, the whitening, the yellowing, and finally, the reddening. This was the path of the great work. Each stage was a chemical milestone, but it was also a psychological one. As the metal moved through these colors, the alchemist was supposed to move through corresponding states of being. The purification of the lead was a purification of the self. What if they were right? What if the separation of chemistry from spirituality was not a step forward, but a fragmentation of a larger, more complete truth? In our world, we have mastered the exterior of the metal. We can turn it into skyscrapers that touch the clouds and wires that carry the light of the world. But we have lost the interior connection. We treat the earth as a warehouse of dead parts. The alchemists saw the earth as a living womb, where metals were slowly gestating toward their ultimate form, which was gold. They believed that their work in the laboratory was simply a way to speed up a natural process, to act as a midwife to the earth. There are whispers in the margins of history of alchemists who lived far longer than they should have, or who produced substances that defied the known laws of the time. We dismiss these as legends, yet we continue to find ancient artifacts that challenge our understanding of early technology. The Damascus steel blades that were stronger and sharper than anything produced in Europe for centuries. The Roman concrete that grows stronger over 2,000 years while our modern mixtures crumble in decades. The Greek fire that burned on water. These were the product of people who did not see a wall between the physical and the mystical. They were the result of a science that included the spirit. As we drift toward the edge of sleep, imagine the laboratory once more. The heat is a soft weight against your skin. The scent of sulfur and charcoal hangs heavy in the air. You hear the rhythmic bubbling of the liquid metal, a sound like a distant sea. In this moment, the metal is not an object. It is a mystery. It is a mirror. You realize that the echoes in the crucible are the echoes of your own thoughts, your own potential. The gold that the alchemist sought was never just a pile of coins. It was a state of being, a fixed and incorruptible light that could survive any fire. We are beginning to look back at these ancient masters with new eyes. We see that their crucibles were the first particle accelerators, their bellows the first life support systems. But more than that, we see a vision of a world where human knowledge does not come at the expense of wonder. They knew that the more you know about the metal, the more you realize how much you do not know. They found a way to live in that mystery, to use it as a tool, and to find a sense of peace within the heat of the transformation. The fire in the hearth begins to die down. The glowing coals shift, settling into a deep, warm red. The crucible is still there, holding its secret, waiting for the next seeker to ask the right question. The metal within is cooling, its atoms finding their places, locking into a structure that will endure long after the fire is out. It is a silent witness to a time when the world was whole, when the laboratory was a temple, and when the study of matter was a journey toward the soul. In the stillness of the night, the echoes of that world remain, reminding us that there is always more to the story than what we can see on the surface. The gold is there, hidden in the lead, waiting for the fire to bring it home. Deep within the quietest corners of history, where the light of the present struggles to reach, lies a vast and silent archive. It is a repository not of stone or steel, but of ink, vellum, and memory. Hey! The manuscripts of the ancient alchemists rest in a state of perpetual decay, their edges curling like dried leaves in autumn. These documents are the maps of a forgotten world, the blueprint for a science that viewed the earth as a living organism rather than a collection of resources. To open one of these volumes is to step into a realm where the distinction between the physical and the metaphysical does not exist. The words on the page are not merely instructions. They are coded language, a bridge between the fire of the forge and the stillness of the human mind. The parchment itself tells a story. It is often thick and uneven, made from the hides of animals that lived centuries ago. The ink is dark and heavy, sometimes metallic, reflecting a faint sheen when the light catches it. These are the records of men and women who spent decades in the company of heat and shadow, seeking to translate the movements of the universe into the behavior of lead, copper, and tin. But as we look upon these fading scripts today, we realize that much of the knowledge they contained has evaporated. It was not lost to fire or war alone, but to the very nature of how the alchemists worked. Theirs was a silent language, a form of communication that relied as much on the intuition of the hands as it did on the clarity of the written word. In the modern world, we communicate through precision. We use numbers, degrees of temperature, and percentages of purity. We have standardized the language of metallurgy so that a scientist in one part of the world can perfectly replicate the experiment of another. But the alchemist operated on a different frequency. To them, the metal was not a passive substance to be measured. It was a partner in a long and arduous conversation. The manuscripts speak of the green lion devouring the sun, of the marriage of the Red King and the White Queen, and of the dragon that bites its own tail. To a modern chemist, these are nothing more than colorful metaphors for chemical reactions. To the alchemist, however, these symbols represented the living soul of the material. They were a shorthand for a sensory experience that could never be fully captured in a textbook. Consider the environment of the ancient forge. It is a place of overwhelming sensory input. The roar of the bellows, the rhythmic clang of the hammer, and the intense, searing heat that turns the air into a shimmering veil. In this space, the smith or the alchemist did not have a thermometer to tell them when the iron was ready. Instead, they watched the color. They looked for the exact moment when the dull red of a dying ember shifted into the vibrant, glowing orange of a harvest moon. They waited for the metal to reach a shade of white that was so bright it seemed to hum with its own internal light. This is the silent language of the forge. It is a knowledge held in the eyes and the fingertips, a refined sensitivity to the subtle shifts in the state of matter. When these practitioners sat down to write their manuscripts, they were faced with an impossible task. How do you describe the sound of metal when it is quenched in water at exactly the right moment? How do you record the precise smell of the sulfurous vapor that signals the beginning of a transformation? They chose to use symbols because symbols were the only things large enough to hold the weight of their experience. They were not trying to hide their secrets from the world, though secrecy was often a necessity for survival. Rather, they were trying to express something that was inherently wordless. The manuscripts we find today are the echoes of that effort. They are the remnants of a time when the human worker and the material world were deeply intertwined. As these manuscripts fade, we are left with a growing silence. We have inherited the objects they made, the blades that do not rust and the alloys that defy our current understanding of structural integrity. We have their names and their legends, but the internal logic of their work has become increasingly difficult to decode. In our quest for efficiency, we have replaced the intuitive touch of the master with the cold accuracy of the machine. We can create materials that are stronger and lighter than anything the ancients could imagine, yet we often find ourselves unable to replicate the specific beauty or the mysterious longevity of their creations. There is a quality in ancient metallurgy that seems to transcend the sum of its parts. It is found in the way a Roman sword maintains its edge after 2 millennia, or in the way the iron pillar of Delhi resists the corrosive touch of the monsoon rains. When we analyze these objects under a microscope, we find traces of elements that we did not expect to see. We find nanostructures that we thought were the exclusive domain of 21st century technology. The manuscript suggests that these were not happy accidents. They were the result of a meticulous and deliberate process, one that involved a deep understanding of the rhythms of the natural world. The alchemists believed that metals grew in the earth like plants. They thought that if left undisturbed for thousands of years, all metals would eventually mature into gold. Their work in the forge was seen as a way to accelerate this natural process, to help the metal achieve its highest potential in a fraction of the time. This perspective changed everything about how they handled the material. They did not see themselves as masters of nature, but as its servants. They approached the forge with a sense of reverence and patience. The manuscripts are filled with warnings against haste. They remind the reader that the fire must be tended like a living thing, and that the metal must be allowed to rest, to breathe, and to transform at its own pace. This patience is perhaps the most significant part of the silent language that we have lost. In our modern age, speed is the ultimate goal. We want our results immediately, and we have developed the technology to ensure that we get them. But in doing so, we may have bypassed the very processes that give a material its unique character. The ancient alchemists understood that time is a physical ingredient. They knew that the slow cooling of a blade over several days would produce a different crystalline structure than the rapid cooling of a modern industrial process. They knew that the orientation of the forge in relation to the prevailing winds, or even the time of year, could influence the outcome of a transmutation. As the ink on the ancient vellum continues to peel away, we are forced to wonder how much of this wisdom is gone forever. Are we looking at the remnants of a primitive superstition, or are we looking at the fragments of a sophisticated science that we are not yet advanced enough to understand? The silence of the manuscripts is a challenge to our modern assumptions. It suggests that there are ways of knowing the world that do not involve data points and spreadsheets. It hints at a form of mastery that is born from a lifelong devotion to a single material, a deep and quiet communion between the human spirit and the elements of the earth. The forge is quiet now, and the manuscripts are locked away in climate-controlled vaults, protected from the very air they were meant to breathe. But the questions they raise remain as vibrant as ever. When we look at a piece of ancient bronze glowing with a soft, timeless patina, we are looking at more than just an alloy of copper and tin. We are looking at a physical manifestation of the silent language. We are seeing the result of 1,000 conversations between a smith and the fire, between a hand and a hammer. The manuscripts may be fading, and the voices of the alchemists may be long since hushed, but the metal itself still speaks. It tells a story of a time when the world was full of mystery, and when the act of creation was a sacred dialogue with the unknown. In the stillness of the library and the heat of the forge, the legacy of the alchemists endures. It is a legacy that reminds us to look closer, to listen more intently, and to remember that the earth still holds secrets that no machine can uncover. The fading manuscripts are not just relics of the past. They are invitations to rediscover the silent language, to reconnect with the material world in a way that is both ancient and entirely new. The gold is there, not just in the metal, but in the wisdom that allows us to see the extraordinary within the ordinary and the eternal within the fleeting. We stand at the edge of this vast archive, waiting for the light to shift, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truths that were written in the shadows of the forge. The fire in the hearth begins to retreat, its violent oranges and yellows softening into a deep, rhythmic amber. The roar of the bellows has long since ceased, leaving behind a silence so profound that the settling of the ash sounds like a whisper across the stone floor. In this quietude, the true work of the alchemist is revealed. It is not found in the heat of the reaction or the bubbling of the solvent, but in the stillness that follows. The metals, once agitated by the flame and the acid, now rest in their crucibles. They are no longer merely materials. To the ancient mind, they are living entities returning to a state of equilibrium, a silence that mirrors the vastness of the cosmos itself. We observe the laboratory as it transitions from a place of labor to a place of contemplation. The air is heavy with the scent of cooling earth and charred oak. On the wooden workbench, a series of glass vials reflects the fading light. Each one contains a different stage of the process, a different moment in the long journey toward perfection. The ancients believed that metals were not static objects. They were in a constant state of growth within the dark veins of the earth, slowly maturing over thousands of years from the common to the precious. The alchemist simply accelerates this natural rhythm, acting as a midwife to the secret desires of the world. In this moment of rest, the concept of the infinite cycle becomes tangible. The symbol of the serpent devouring its own tail, the Ouroboros, is etched into the stone above the lintel. It serves as a reminder that in the world of the elements, there is no true end and no absolute beginning. Everything is in a state of becoming. The lead that was melted hours ago carries within it the potential for gold, just as the gold carries the memory of the lead. This is the great secret that we have perhaps forgotten in our modern era. We see matter as a collection of atoms to be rearranged, but the alchemist sees it as a narrative to be understood. Consider the possibility that their understanding of the elemental world was not limited by a lack of technology, but rather enhanced by a different kind of perception, where we see a periodic table of distinct and isolated elements. They saw a grand tapestry of interconnected signatures. They believed that every metal resonated with a specific frequency, a celestial harmony that linked the depths of the earth to the movements of the planets. Iron was a resonance of Mars, bold and unyielding. Copper was the echo of Venus, conductive and receptive. In the stillness of the laboratory, these resonances do not dissipate. They hum at a frequency just below the threshold of human hearing, a gentle vibration that stabilizes a room. The narrator watches as a single drop of condensation slides down the side of a cooling alembic. This liquid, distilled through hours of careful heating, represents the essence of the Welk. It is a mercury of the philosophers, a substance that is neither solid nor liquid, neither spirit nor body. It is a bridge between worlds. If the ancient masters knew more about the nature of metals than we do today, it is because they understood this bridge. They did not seek to dominate nature, but to align themselves with its underlying laws. They knew that to change a metal, one must first understand the stillness at its core. The documentary lens lingers on the surface of a pool of purified mercury. It is a perfect mirror, reflecting the rafters of the ceiling and the faint glimmer of the stars through the high window. In this reflection, the boundaries between the observer and the observed begin to blur. The alchemist does not stand outside the experiment. He is an integral part of the cycle. His own patience, his own focus, and his own internal quietude are the catalysts that allow the elements to transform. This is a concept that challenges our modern scientific detachment. It suggests that the quality of our attention might actually influence the behavior of the physical world. As the night deepens, the metals in their vessels reach room temperature. This is a stage of the work known as the fermentation, a period of waiting where the subtle energies of the elements are allowed to mingle and mature. It is a lesson in the power of inactivity. In our world of constant movement and rapid production, the idea of waiting for a metal to find its own soul seems foreign. Yet, for the ancient practitioner, this is where the miracle occurs. The stillness is not an absence of action, but a presence of potential. It is the dark soil in which the golden seed begins to stay. We move deeper into the shadows of the workshop, where the older, forgotten tools are kept. These are the instruments of a science that does not rely on electricity or digital precision. They are made of clay, leather, and wood. They feel heavy and honest in the hand. There is a sense that these tools were designed to be used by someone who understood the weight of the elements. When an ancient alchemist touched a piece of tin, he was not just touching a commodity. He was touching a fragment of the history of the universe. He felt the coldness of the celestial spheres and the pressure of the mountain. This tactile connection allowed for a depth of knowledge that cannot be captured in a data point or a graph. The mystery of the ancient forge lies in its ability to produce results that defy our expectations. We find artifacts from antiquity that possess a purity of alloy or resistance to corrosion that we struggle to replicate even with our most advanced furnaces. Perhaps they knew how to talk to the fire in a way we have forgotten. Perhaps they knew that a fire is not just a source of heat, but a transformative intelligence. By listening to the hiss of the flame and the crackle of the fuel, they could navigate the delicate threshold where matter begins to yield its secrets. The infinite cycle continues as the moon rises higher, casting a silver glow over the laboratory. This silver light is a domain of the moon, the celestial counterpart to the metal we call silver. In the alchemical tradition, silver is the light of the mind, the cool and reflective wisdom that balances the golden heat of the sun. To rest in the stillness of the elements is to find the balance between these two forces. It is to recognize that the world is composed of dualities that are constantly seeking union. Light and shadow, heat and cold, action and rest. As we stand in this quiet space, The urgency of discovery fades away. It is replaced by a profound sense of belonging. The metals in their jars, the stone of the walls, and the breath of the observer are all part of the same continuous fabric. The ancient alchemists did not see themselves as masters of the elements, but as humble participants in a cosmic dance. They knew that the gold they sought was not just a physical treasure, but a symbol of the perfected soul. By refining the metal, they were refining themselves. By bringing the elements to rest, they were finding their own internal peace. The camera panned slowly across the room, catching the glint of a crystal, the curve of a copper bowl, and the rough texture of a piece of unrefined ore. Each object is a silent witness to the search for truth. If we allow ourselves to drift into the same stillness, we might begin to hear the echoes of that lost knowledge. It is a knowledge that does not shout, but speaks in the language of shadows and light. It tells us that the universe is alive, that every atom is imbued with a purpose, and that the greatest discoveries are often made when we stop searching and simply begin to notice. The heavy door of the laboratory remains closed, sealing in the warmth and the silence. Outside, the world continues its frantic pace, but inside, time has lost its grip. The elements are at rest. The cycle has completed one turn and is preparing for the next. There is a comfort in this repetition, a sense of security in the knowledge that nothing is ever truly lost. The metals will wait. The fire will eventually be lit again. But for now, there is only the stillness. We are invited to let go of the questions that have driven us through the previous chapters of history. The debate over chemical formulas and historical timelines fades into the background. What remains is the immediate experience of the elements in their quietest state. We feel the coolness of the stone floor beneath us. We hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of a mechanical clock, a heartbeat for the room. We breathe in the scent of aged parchment and dried herbs. This is the resting place of the great work. The narrator's voice becomes a soft tether, guiding us toward the edge of sleep. The infinite cycle of the elements is a mirror for our own journey. We too have our periods of intense heat and transformation, our moments of struggle and change. And we too must find our way back to stillness. In the silence of the alchemist's chamber, we find a sanctuary where the mind can finally put down its burdens. The metals are at peace, their internal vibrations flowing to a gentle, restorative hum. The work is sufficient. The day is done. As the final embers turn to gray silk, the laboratory vanishes into the velvet dark. The boundaries of the room expand until they encompass the entire night sky. We are no longer looking at a small workshop in a forgotten corner of history. We are looking at a forge of the stars, where the very atoms of our bodies were once synthesized in the heat of a dying sun. The alchemist's secret is finally revealed. It is a realization that we are made of the same stuff as the gold and the lead, the silver and the iron. We are part of the infinite cycle, and in this stillness, we are finally home. The elements are quiet. The air is still. The rest is complete.